All discussions and interactions are meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. They're not intended to breach the ATA Code of Conduct, single out any student or educator, or diminish professional integrity in any way. I'm Conrad Drover. Join me as I sit down with inspiring professionals from diverse fields to gain valuable insight from their experiences and knowledge to help me grow as both an educator in the classroom and as a person in all areas of my life. This is Professional Development. Hi everybody. Today I have a very special guest. He is considered the internet's social studies teacher, the one and only Steve Boots. Now Steve is a certified teacher. He's based out of Regina, Saskatchewan, and he has spent a better part of 2 decades in the classroom. But this year, Steve stepped away from the classroom to become a full-time content creator. His YouTube channel focuses on the analysis and critique of Canadian politics from a left-wing perspective. Having over 70,000 subscribers, Steve works to educate his audience on human rights, government policies, and ideology. Steve has also expressed his absolute hatred for interviews that don't have a table between the interviewee and the interviewer. I wonder if you've seen my channel. Anyway, despite this war on legs, Steve is a refreshing force of reason on the YouTube landscape, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to learn from him. So, without further ado, here's Steve Boots. All right, there we are, Steve Boots. Nice to have you on.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, your channel was how I got through the last 4 months of politics.
It's been a crazy time, man. And people it's funny. Politics are a lot to take in at the best of times, but if you don't have, and I don't mean this judgmentally, but like if somebody doesn't have the tool set to wrap their head around what's happening, maybe they don't have the background knowledge they need, maybe they haven't, been taught the analytical tools that they need, it can be really overwhelming. And so I try to make it a little more welcoming and a little bit easier to wrap your head around. Yeah,
and when I watch you, it feels like I'm in a grade 7 social studies class. And
it's kind of built in.
I know, right? And but I think that's the best way to communicate effectively. It's like the way you're talking, even your mannerisms and the language you use, like friends, like to address people. Like that is not invisible. Like I see it.
Some people hate that. I get DMs saying, "Don't call me friend. I'm not your friend." It's like, too bad you are my friend, sucker.
I'm not your friend, guy. I'm not your guy, buddy.
It's weird because the friends thing actually mostly just came because I taught in French, and in French you say mes amis a lot. Like that's just kind of how you get the attention of a room full of kids a lot of times. And so it just kind of carried over, and it's a thing. But yeah, I definitely do think of my content as being very much sort of the internet social studies teacher, because I genuinely think that's, everybody asks me what the answer is to all of the political nonsense and whatever. And there's no complete answer, but there's no version of the answer that doesn't come with a lot of education. And so I think genuinely what Canada needs right now more than anything is a social studies teacher. And so I try to fill that role.
Yeah, no, and you're definitely doing it. And I also like when you don't know the answer, it does go into a tangent of explaining why you wouldn't know the answer, or why the answer is unknowable at this point.
Yeah.
Or another inquiry-based learning. You ask another question to start the conversation, right?
I am all about making the process of learning visible. So if somebody asks a question, I don't have an answer, or they bring forward an interesting idea, we'll go down that together. And I very much try to make that process very overt, right? It is literally the most basic teaching skills. I'm modeling as I go all the time. Even in how I interact with the chat, I'm modeling. Right? Even, so even in other cases, we're scaffolding constantly, right? We're easing people into content all the time. there is a reason why I don't say Marxism out loud very much, but I talk about leftist ideas, is because I'm easing people into stuff and like building over time and recognizing that you do need to scaffold people into big complex concepts. And so that's really what my channel is at. And, you know, eventually we'll probably get more into the weeds on some stuff, but like, really, I'm building a baseline of education level in my audience. And I think they really appreciate it, because I think a lot of people feel like either social studies kind of missed them. In a lot of cases, it is, particularly in the younger grades, a fairly I don't want to say it's under taught. Like, people are teaching it, absolutely, but it's definitely not a priority for a lot of elementary school teachers. Like, it's sort of something that fits into the larger mix, but like, especially in the younger grades, it's not the highest thing on the list for a lot of folks. But at the same time, a lot of the fundamental learning about the structure of government and how Canadian society works is at that age. But you don't have a lot of dedicated social studies training for the elementary level. Like, if you go through an elementary school program, you'll get some, obviously, but it's definitely not a focus. And like, for me, I went through secondary education, and I had two teachables. I had English and social studies. Which is why I wound up being, high school English and social studies, which is why I wound up being a grade school French immersion teacher, as one does. You know,
yeah, my teachables are phys ed and biology, and I'm teaching grade 7 math, and then film studies and computer science. Like,
you wind up in places you didn't expect, and that's part of the fun. But you still bring your expertises with you. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to be the guy whose wheelhouse is English and social studies. And so like, there was a couple of years there where my school moved to more of like a college model, where there was one teacher who taught all the ELA, and one person who taught all the social, and one person who taught all the science and whatever, which is fairly uncommon for grade schools. But we tried it out to see if it worked better for the students. And let me tell you, I was in my element teaching English and social studies all day. Because like, you have to be very diverse as a teacher, but you can still have your specialties. You can still have the things that you bring extra value to, and the things that you can really make dance for the kids. And so like, it's so funny, because what I do on stream is not wildly different from how I started my days in classrooms. For years, we started the day with current events, and I sat on a table at the front of the class and I said, what's going on in the world? And had the kids bring stories. And it was very funny, because they thought they were getting one over on me. They're like, oh yeah, we're bringing a million nothing stories to make this current events take up half the morning. I'm like, joke's on you. You're learning stuff the whole time. Because they'll bring up some random current event and be like, oh, this is a great opportunity. Like, the current event's about a dam. Okay, well, let's talk about how hydroelectricity works for a minute. And let's check off that little bit of the curriculum, and we'll tailor a little assessment to that later in the day. And you find ways to sort of, you know, use your own skill set to make the materials dance and to make things come together. And so that's still the same thing I do on stream. It's just I provide the current events, because that was part of my in school. It was my elaborate ploy to get them to read the news.
Right. Yeah, no, I see like, even like the social studies teacher here, like, I think Fridays they literally watch global news, and like they like talk about it. And I like what you're saying about, you know, you have something to bring, like your style. It's like almost your accent to whatever you're teaching, right? So I've heard the phrase like, don't follow your passion, bring your passion with you to whatever you do. And so what I've been doing is like, my science stuff is like a lot of video based, discussion based stuff now. So I have this podcast set up. I'm like, hey, we're doing like heat and energy in grade 7. And I'm like, come to my room at lunch. We'll film a podcast. 5 minutes, we'll talk about studying. And basically it's literally just verbal review. What did you learn? How to like explain it to me as in a conversation. And then we have 20 minutes. You can talk about anything, your dirt bike, whatever. And then, man, like, kids are revolving door in my lunchtime trying to get into this podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, kids. Yeah. And when you bring things that you care about and know about to your classroom, kids absolutely grab onto that 100%.
Yeah, and like, they know how to get me off topic too, except it's not current event, it's Star Wars. But like, other than that,
here's the thing though, I bet you a huge portion of what you remember out of school was not curriculum, right? And I think those tangents are part of the magic. That's kind of where it all happens, because that's where the kids get to know you. That's where you become more than just, the dude at the front of the class who tells me to do division. And so those moments that you're able to let the armor down and be a person in front of them are really, really important. And I actually think, like, the very sort of metrics focused sort of path that we're in education right now, where, like, those reading levels got to go up, so we don't really have time for chit chat. I think that can be counterproductive in a lot of ways, because I think there needs to be lots of good space for relationship building. Because, like, when you share that you love Star Wars, there's probably some quiet kid in the back who feels a little more seen in that moment, because there's a little bit of a shared interest there, right? And so I think that has a lot of
Yeah.
value.
Well, like, it was even funny because, like, I was like, have you ever watched Andor on Disney Plus or whatever?
I'm a little behind, so no spoilers.
Okay. Well, I was come back from the weekend or whatever, just pumped about this, and I started like yapping about it to my grade 10's Comtech class, and like this one girl that I have in the class, she's like doing her math homework because I let them do the math if that's what they need to get done instead of Photoshop. And she was like half listening, and I was telling them about Andor, about how like the Emperor's taking over and doing all these crazy things. And like, she doesn't know anything about Star Wars, but she was like listening. She's like, aren't they just ripping off what's happening in the United States? Like, that's literally what this like 10th grade student said to me. And I was like, well, it was written beforehand, but it's kind of interesting to know that like things are stranger than fiction sometimes.
Yeah, they're a little ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, no, I get totally what you're saying, because yeah, the only things I really remember about school is my grade 6, 7, and 8 math teacher. He was a jiu-jitsu fighter and like Star Wars geek, Nightmare on Elm Street horror movie buff. And so that's what I remember, and Louis Riel, because I can't go a day without thinking of Louis Riel in Manitoba schools. Yeah.
I mean, half of them are named after him.
Yeah, there you go. Like, I went to Louis Riel School Division.
There you go.
Yeah. When I found your channel, I think you just released a video, or maybe it was a little after that, but you released a video of like why I like moved from teaching, or why I started YouTube or something like that. And man, so right now I'm teaching in like Crossfield, small town Alberta, and you out of everyone would probably be up to date with like a lot of stuff in terms of like what's happening in Alberta and the Wicked Witch of the West that's running it. Like,
we went through a very similar fight in Saskatchewan last year.
Yeah, so like we're about to strike like right away. It's probably going to happen September, but like we're doing our authorization vote in the next week here, and then we're doing the strike vote probably after that. So I actually got a job in Winnipeg though, so I'm moving back in August. Yeah.
Okay, so like if you hang out on the stream, I kind of have a weird affinity for Winnipeg. I like Winnipeg. It's a good city. So good for you.
Yeah. No, I grew up there. I'm a Manitoba Bison. Like, I have the tattoo of the university's logo on my shoulder. That's the whole reason I went to university, because I got a scholarship. I wasn't a really good student at all, but I picked it up when I had to, and I got there. But yeah, I'm coming. I call it escaping Alberta. Like, it's nice.
Things aren't great over there right now.
Yeah, and I feel bad because there's so many good teachers here that are just beat. Like, just beat, like exhausted.
It's tough. And like, I think the morale crisis in education is really underrated. Like, I think it doesn't take long online to see how much teachers are hurting in particular. Like, if you open up r/teachers on Reddit, there's a lot of people who are struggling. If you talk, like, I got lots of friends who are still in the classroom when I talk to them. Like, they still love it, obviously, but like that love can only carry you so far when you're exhausted and doing more with less every year. And so I think the morale crisis in education is being really underrated. And so something like, pushing the teachers to a strike just keeps throwing more gas on the fire and just keeps making matters worse. And the teacher shortage just keeps growing. It's unbelievable to me that they keep acting like this.
Is there a teacher shortage in Saskatchewan as well?
It depends on the place. The cities generally are okay. But as you get more rural and northern, it's very hard to fill those roles.
Right. Because I know it's really big in Alberta, and Manitoba is actually the opposite. Like there's such a surplus of graduates. So my fiance is trying to she just graduated from a university in Calgary, and she's like doing the transfer over and stuff like that. So I got the job, I think, just based on experience because I've been teaching for 7 years, right? But the cool thing about Winnipeg is that we can actually afford a house on my salary, right? Calgary is crazy.
Oh, it's the same thing with Regina. People ask why I stay in Regina, and it's like, yeah, because I can afford to live here.
like cost of living's up.
Oh yeah, I start sort of like idly dreaming about moving to like BC or something, and then you're like, oh, never mind, it's $1 million for a postage stamp. I'm good.
Yeah, no, it's wild. So that was like part of our reason, like, is the teachers get paid more in Manitoba than they do Alberta, and the cost of living. So it's sort of, and my mom, she had diagnosed with cancer a couple of years ago, so it'd be cool to stay with her. But yeah, so that's the big transition that's happening, and it was awesome. Like, it's cool when you mention Winnipeg on the stream. I don't know, like, I know it's such a small thing, but I'm like, hey, yeah, I know that place. Like, it's good.
It's like it's written on the back of my guitar. So glad to be here in Winnipeg.
Yeah. Oh, I actually like got a question about, and maybe you would know this, maybe you don't, but I know right now, I guess one of the Liberal governments, they're like promises where they're going to like cut the trade barriers between provinces, which I think in general is not a bad idea to do. I wonder how that's going to affect teaching certification by province.
This is like such an interesting thing. Whenever people talk about the interprovincial trade barriers and all this stuff, the first question that always gets asked is, why do we have them? And the answer really comes down to, because we have provincial jurisdictions. Every jurisdiction has its own different rules about stuff. And so I think it would be extremely well advised for Canada to normalize teacher certification across the country, come up with some sort of baseline certification. That would be obviously very, very difficult. And you'd need to, I think any version of that process that doesn't bring unions into that process is a big problem. Like, teachers need a lot of voice in this if you're going to do it. But I think the idea of having free movement of teachers around the country is in principle a good idea. We just need to make sure that individual, provinces don't get screwed over by this. But yeah, it's such a classic example of everybody sort of wanting to protect their stuff. But like, at the same time, like, I'm from Saskatchewan. My teaching certificate is K-12, any subject. That is not the same everywhere though, right? Like, there's some subtleties around this sort of thing where you need additional qualifications and stuff. And in Saskatchewan, that's not really the case. We do have an accreditation program where you no longer have to give like departmental exams and stuff. How do you normalize that across provinces, right? Like, there's a lot of difference from province to province around certification and standards. There's also a lot of difference from province to province around certification and regulation. And like, when it comes to like teacher supervision and discipline and all that stuff. So I would be a little surprised to see certifications go national, but I think on the whole it would be a positive. Unlikely though at present.
Yeah, because they would have to change like the grid structure and like the salary stuff, like harmonize it in some way, or have equivalents, right? Like, well, I guess they already do. The reason I'm asking this is because, again, my fiance is graduating with an Alberta certificate, and then we're moving right away to Manitoba. And man, I don't, like, you've been teaching for well over a decade, I assume, right?
17 years, yeah.
17 years. So it's been a while, but like, the Alberta, sorry to age you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I truly didn't.
It's been a while. Yes, back in the before times. When I started teaching, they gave me a MacBook. None of this Chromebook garbage.
The Chromebooks are awful.
You whippersnappers.
But like, my fiance is waiting on the Alberta education, which is like no one even answers the phone there anymore,
Mm-hmm.
like Alberta education, and waiting for that certificate to come in. And then you have to contact Manitoba, which is then a giant wait time. And
Mm-hmm.
then like she probably won't have her certificate by September. Like it is just a annoyance of
Oh, it's a
bureaucracy
huge
that
thing.
is not well funded. Like you can tell the funding of Alberta Ed is not great because
No.
they're so behind on every aspect of certification, looking over documents, doing everything. Like it's just been a roller coaster.
Well, so this is one of the curses of talking about per student funding, right? Or per pupil or
Right.
pupil teacher ratios is
Yeah.
it doesn't capture the systemic deficits that get created by that. Because as soon as your metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good metric, right? Because if you're entirely focused on something like, for example, student teacher ratio or pupil teacher ratio, then you are going to basically declare that everything that isn't a classroom teacher in front of those kids is negotiable, which means the behavioral supports, the psychological supports, but also the organizational supports and systemic supports, even things like getting you your teaching certificate in time. That's all a budget line that can be cut. If the only metric we're tracking is, teachers per student or students per teacher, then all this other stuff is disposable. But that puts all of that burden over onto that teacher and all of that stress and all that frustration, all that stuff onto that teacher. And it's just a worsening of conditions. And it's a big part of why you wind up doing more with less. And yet you have governments every year saying record spending, record spending, record spending. It's like, yeah, I'm spending record amounts on groceries every year, but that doesn't mean I'm getting more food.
That is a very good point that everyone thinks about, like the inside the school funding, but then
Mhm.
there's a whole bunch of other systemic stuff that it also needs money to function. And like I
Yeah.
guess people,
And it gets
but again,
viewed.
people are so stressed that
Yeah.
they only can focus on the things in front of them at that point.
But those really important supportive jobs get viewed as fat that can be trimmed instead of the
Yeah.
valuable jobs that they in many cases are. Now, to be clear, there's always going to be organizational waste, and you can target that. But like,
Yeah.
it's like when
Printers.
every new government comes in, they're like, we're going to cut all the waste, and then like 4 years later, it's like, turns out there wasn't actually that much waste, right? Because like
Yeah.
this is how it always goes. Everybody thinks they have the magic answer, but the answer always winds up just being cutting services.
Yeah. And your channel is actually sort of what got me on that path to thinking about like government spending as like you're just investing in services. Like it's not like wasting the money, you're using that money. And
I
I'll
always tell
be
people you're not burning it in a pile. You're paying somebody's salary, which
yeah,
means they're
and
going to
like
turn around and pay mortgages and buy goods in the community and propel the economy, right? Like when you give more money to a billionaire or a shareholder, that's not getting circulated in the economy, but a teacher's salary is, right? And so like people lose this perspective. They really do think that public services are just burning money in a pile. And it's like, no, you're buying something. You are exchanging money for a service here. And like, it fascinates me how much people have just been weaponized against government spending.
yeah, I think people have like again, um my family really like my dad's a Red SEAL. He has two Red SEALs, one in millwright, one in welding. My brothers are all very good construction workers. One has a roofing business, one is road construction. The other one was a carpenter, but now he's trying to become a knowledge keeper
Okay,
in
cool.
terms in his like he kind of got lost away from his like indigenous. I have a step family, and my step family is like Plains Cree,
Okay.
and so I sort of grew up with them. I'm white as Wonder Bread, but like I grew up with them, and it was like crazy seeing. I guess like I met them when I was 8, and they were a
Mhm.
little older than me, so their beginning of their life was much more difficult than the beginning of my life,
Mhm.
and so I saw a lot of like different upbringings, different consequences to that in
Mhm.
their teenage years and stuff like that. And my brother Nathan really turned his life around. So now he's doing workshops, drum workshops. I got him virtually to do a Orange Shirt Day presentation with my school and stuff like that. So he's doing really good. Sorry, I tangented off there.
That's all right.
But what I'm trying to think about, and I'll be totally honest, the one thing that really gets me into your channel is the way that you can sort of shift people's perspectives.
Mhm.
Because my family, really great people. I work in small town Alberta, so there's a lot of conservative people that are actually really nice people. But there is a cognitive dissonance that I find. I guess I'll start off with before. I guess let's say 5 years ago, I was down that Jordan Peterson pipeline. Man, like I bought his book, his 12 Rules for Life, and like
So did I.
to be fair, like there was some good takeaways on that. Like in terms of when he's dealing with psychology, like I liked it. I was like, clean a room. I know
It's
you're
hit and
laughing,
miss.
but
It's
like,
hit and miss.
yeah, there was some things that you could distill down to like, okay, what is he trying to say? And then
it's like any standard self-help book. There's stuff you can find.
Yeah. And like, again, like I just listened to it. I thought it was okay. And I cleaned my room or whatever he said.
Except his room is a mess.
Yeah. Believe me, like I say that now knowing that there's a lot of hypocrisy. When he got angry, man, like angry. Like once he got Twitter, and I was like, wasn't one of your rules like careful what you say or whatever? Like be like, and then so that kind of like, and then also like going through education and like becoming a better teacher. I'm like, this guy sucks at being a teacher. Like he extrapolates and uses difficult language just for the sake of using difficult language. And like know his audience. Like his audience doesn't know that language like at all. Like so
what is he doing when he does that, do you think? Because I have a theory.
I think he is trying to break something down that he wants people to value as complex when really it's simple. Like he wants to seem smarter than he actually is, but I don't even know if that's conscious. I think he just thinks that basic ideas are complicated, and I don't know. I would like to hear like an actual honest reason for it, but I don't know. What's your take?
The longer you work, I've worked as a creator, the more I recognize it's same as teaching that one of your roles is to create an emotional state in your audience. For learning in a classroom, that emotional state is probably calm, relaxed, feeling welcome, safe, friendly, right? There's states that's going to make somebody way more receptive to, it's states that are going to make people feel way more receptive to learning. I think that the state that Peterson and folks like that are trying to create in their audience is feeling smart. It makes them feel like they're listening to something very high-minded, even though like if you know the words he's using and listen and break it down at all, he's saying a lot of nonsense. Like he's just sort of saying big words to say big words and show off how clever he is. But it's all to create the appearance that the people who are listening to them, that makes them feel like, oh, I'm very clever for listening to this, because listen to how smart he is. He uses such big words. He's so magnanimous about it. And it's sort of the opposite with Joe Rogan, that he brings such an unquestioning perspective that the audience feels very clever just by listening to somebody ask incredibly rudimentary questions. Right. It's to create the feeling of, as much as anything else, is to create the feeling of being smart or good or feeding your ego in some way.
Yeah, entertainment, right? Like that's, I think that's, and I like Joe Rogan, I can give more of a pass than Jordan Peterson, because I always think Jordan Peterson is more, he labels himself as an educator, right? And like, I can't stand that, because as an educator, I try to simplify everything to like make it as rudimentary as possible so that people can pick up on it. And he just does the opposite of that. And it drives me bonkers. And then when he got all hateful on Twitter, that's sort of when I was like, bro, you went too far. Like you had me a bit, like a little bit, but you can't just be like dead naming people and being rude to people. And I was like, man, like, I don't know the level of self-awareness. I just don't know where it's at with him. Like, I don't know if he's like intentionally doing it or if he's like just completely oblivious to it because he thinks he's a prophet or something like that.
I don't think it's that. I think there's, something happens when you hit a certain level of fame. Now, I have a very tiny level of internet niche micro celebrity. And even I, because you are very public, people gravitate to you who agree with you and think you're good. And so your ego gets fed, and it becomes so easy, number one, to believe your farts don't stink, but number two, to surround yourself with sycophants. It could be so easy. And like, it becomes very clear very quickly, even at the tiny level of notability that I've arrived at, that you can surround yourself with yes men and sycophants so easily. And I think that's very commonly what happens with these folks. There's nobody telling them that it's bad. And when they do this stuff and they get internet blowback, they're surrounded by people who are saying, nah, you're right. They're the ones who are nuts. Look at those woke libs. Right. And so I think that also happens where people get in these silos. And I think, I think we underestimate how isolated, not isolated, how sort of insular some of the circles around some of these, notable commentators can be.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, it is intriguing. Like it is captivating to someone that's like listening to this, and especially when they yell about the same problems you feel like you're having, right? And then it sort of gravitates to them. Speaking of that, hi everyone. Hope you're enjoying the video. I just want to take a brief moment just to interject and say, if you haven't already, could you please follow on Spotify and subscribe on YouTube? That is the best way to show your support and to get new content. Some other low effort ways that you can show your support for the show, besides subscribing and following, is leaving a comment on each episode, liking each episode, and most importantly, sharing each episode on social media. Those are the best ways you can help us grow. Thank you for watching. Hope you're enjoying it. Back to the show. One of the things about living in Alberta is that you have these discussions all the time about, like, again, my good friends, we are talking about the carbon tax, right? And can I just share what I think it is, and then you agree or disagree with me, like what the incentive is?
Let's hear
it. Because so from my understanding, like let's say the carbon tax, either the industrial one or the personal one, right, is it's a tax on the corporations based on how much carbon they output. And then that tax goes into a pool of money that is distributed, I think, evenly across the population, like the people. And so you get a carbon tax rebate here, there,
to
and
some
there.
degree. There's
right?
Some nuance there because it varied province to province, but more or less.
Okay. So essentially, what I think about that when they're talking about saying like, oh, like that's ruining industry, it's taking over or whatever, like it's cutting their bottom line. And I'm like, well, isn't this the same as, imagine if we're all shareholders, we're all just getting a piece of like the output, right? It's just the population of Canada is the shareholders. And why is that such a bad thing? And then this is where like I literally had two of my friends that are both engineers. I said, hey, like I heard about like this idea that what if we like socialize energy, and then like we would have better roads, we would have like better education, because all that extra money, that profit, would just be literally just distributed to the government, and like the government could do that. And man, I got looked at like I was like a traitor, like, and I don't like, and then I thought, why do people not get this, right? And then I was thinking, I was like, well, they probably, a lot of it comes down to some of the people that I come into contact with a lot. They still think about that trickle down economics. They're like, well, if it's cheaper for the business, then they'll give us more jobs and then we can get more money. And then I thought that too for like most of my adult life. And then I think one time on your stream or whatever, I was listening, and it was like, well, the productivity to how much we're like the production rate and how much our wages don't equal up. Like, so it's like, even if we drop the carbon tax, would they even drop the price of fuel? Because they have an obligation to their shareholders or whoever to keep that profit up. So what is a measly like carbon tax going to do with that? And I'm sitting there like trying to explain it to myself, but also to them at the same time. And I'm like, God damn, I wish Steve Boots was right here. Like,
so I always call that the volcano god theory of economics, where if we just sacrifice enough to the economy, it'll give us jobs. Like we like literally, I call it the volcano god because they literally talk about it like it's some sort of primordial god where it's like, oh, if we give more tax cuts, if we give more of our money to the volcano god, we will get jobs. And it's like, there's an easier way to do this where we don't throw anything in a volcano, where we all just nationalize things. And, it's very interesting because like, I think the idea of who should own the means of production, who should own the oil, all that stuff is in a lot of ways really indicative of just how propagandized people have been. Like if you say communism, that is a dirty word. If you say socialism, for a lot of people, that is a dirty word. But if you actually take them through and you break down the relationships between capital owning the means of production and workers owning the means of production, and you're like, look, all I'm saying is that the profits from your labor should go to you and the other workers generating the value rather than shareholders who have nothing to do with any of this. And the only thing that they've contributed is a little bit of money. And they go, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. And you're like, yeah, that's socialism. Well, now I hate it. Right. And a lot of that is because, for starters, in particularly like during the Cold War, anti-communist propaganda was wild. And people are still deeply propagandized. Like, ask the average Albertan what they think about living conditions in China and compare that to what China is actually like. They have nothing in common with one another because most people don't really know much about China except what they've been told, right? It's the same thing with like even somewhere like North Korea. I think most people just have it in their heads like North Korea bad. And look, this is not like I'm not sitting here and endorsing North Korea, but I think most people don't even have a rudimentary understanding of what life there is like, right? And so I think, yeah, go ahead.
I literally talked to Timothy Chow. He works for, he's a UK activist. He escaped North Korea when he was in early teenager. Twice he got captured again. And he explained all about North Korea and how you're fed so much propaganda that you think like the West is bad. It's almost like, I guess, the opposite of what you were just saying, but like the religion there is the Kim family or whatever. And he was talking about that. But I do feel like what you're saying is like people think of China as just as bad as North Korea, stuff like that. Like, whereas China's capitalist, right? Is it not? Like most
kinda, it's a planned economy, but like with China, the reason why I think of China is because I think most people in the West assume that it's some sort of totalitarian regime that just controls everybody's lives, and they're like, oh, it's horrible. They don't have elections like we do or whatever it may be, and the party holds so much power. But what people don't recognize, and this is sort of the reason why I think of this example, people in China have different expectations of the government, different relationships with the government. And like the Chinese government has like something like 85% complaint resolution rate. Like if you complain about a pothole, it gets turned around quick because it's just different. And like people have trouble recognizing that it isn't just, our society with a different coat of paint on it. It is a different place with different values, different expectations of society, different social networks, different expectations of your government. And so I think that's where you see people really propagandized is they only see one narrow window of expectations that they can have for the government or even actions that their government can take. It's called the Overton window. It's the window of what you're able to talk about and what's sort of acceptable within political discourse. And so like right now, communism's way off the map. And so that's by design, right? That sort of stuff is by design. And like in Alberta, you have resource companies spending massive amounts of money on advertising. Like odds are if you have a local rink in Alberta, there's an oil company's name on it or a mineral company's name on it. Odds are if there's a community center, some oil company or mineral company has made some significant donation to it. And it's really created this series of beliefs that paired with some degree of reality, particularly in the 90s and 2000s, that oil was the ordinary person's path to like class elevation, to building a little wealth, all of that stuff. Oil really did give people a lot for a period of time there. And now it's gotten to the point where people believe that that's the only way that they can prosper in Alberta. And a lot of that's because a lot of money has been spent on that. A lot of that is because a lot of energy has been spent on that, a lot of lobbying, all those things. They narrow the options down and they narrow understandings down.
It reminds me of Weyland Yutani, like from Aliens, like that evil corporation. That's the number one thing I think of when I'm thinking of like Suncor or Enbridge or anything like that. It's like, but I guess if you are a shareholder, like if you are working there, like I know a bunch of mining engineers, and like some of their salary is in stocks. Like they get, but they're not like super wealthy. Like they do well. Like they're higher middle class, stuff like that. But when the company tanks or does bad, like they literally see like a bonus or something gone, or they literally see like their shares that they usually get or whatever has dropped,
Mm-hmm.
and they legitimately freak out because they're worried because they have so much of their nest egg built into that. So I can see where they're like,
Yeah.
again, their animosity to vote liberal or NDP, God forbid, like to I see their point that they're scared that they're going to lose their tickets. They've already invested so much in this that they're like, oh man, like, yeah, I'm all for the social stuff and like helping people out, but man, don't touch my retirement. Like, I feel
No.
like some people are like that in Alberta.
I mean, are people only like that in Alberta? Like the example I think
Like,
of
I
is the
guess,
housing market, right?
yeah.
There are a lot of people who have most of their wealth tied up in their house. And if the housing market tanks, like, we need to bring down housing prices. Okay, great. What happens to the people who have all of their retirement tied up in their house? Are they going to get screwed over? And so they start voting for policies and for politicians who are going to protect the value in that house. They aren't going to vote for the ones who are really going to get housing built because that would lower the values of their holdings.
So what's the solution to that? Like, it seems like you have two groups of people fighting for different interests or opposite interests, actually.
The answer to both is the same. It's a universal basic income.
Right.
The reason why people are in such peril is because they live in precarity. The reason why people are so open to being propagandized is because they live in precarity. They do not have the stability that they need to feel safe in their life. They feel like it could all go away in a second. Right. And it is to some degree true. If the oil dries up in Alberta, there's going to be a lot of people who are out of work and there isn't really a plan for them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think people feel that precarity. And I think people in the oil industry do know that it's not going to be the good times forever. And I think they're really scared of when the good times end and are doing everything they can to try to perpetuate them. But it's not going to jump back to 2014. We can't go back to $100 a barrel oil. And
Mm-hmm.
so they get very scared. And so I think the way that you deal with that precarity is with a universal basic income, something that or something similar that provides a guaranteed social safety net where people don't feel like if the oil dries up, I might lose my house. If the oil dries up, I might not be able to afford groceries for my family. Right? I think that's really important.
Well, what would you say to like again? I find most people when like you talk about universal basic income and stuff like that, is that they have a notion that like, and I have a couple theories on this, but they have the notion that people just get lazy or not productive, and like, and what I really think it is that they feel like a lot of their self-worth is in how much they have worked. And then when they see someone else like skeeting by or getting something for
Yep.
free, I feel like that freaks people out, or like something like some insecurity in people start to like really come
Yeah.
out.
They've been fed for their whole lives and in many cases embraced a version of the world where the only way that you have value is if you constantly earn it. If you constantly prove your worth, you have to be constantly demonstrating your value. And the problem with that belief is that if you tie all of your value up to work, then what do we do with people who can't? Right? It means that people with disabilities, people with health, whatever it may be, people who can't find work, all of a sudden they're viewed as being valueless. But there's also the part where like you see this very much in the oil patch and stuff where you see people spending huge amounts of time away from their families, huge amounts of their, giving up their health and their enormous amounts of things in order to sacrifice for all this stuff. And they don't see the version of life where they have value without working. They're like, well, what if people don't work that hard? Well, that would be quite good. I would like more people to spend time with their kids, with more time in their communities. Like we're like, oh, well, people don't spend time with their families. Yeah, it's because they're working, 50, 60 hours a week. People working less would be quite good. And then they're like, well, what if, when people are like, well, what if somebody just sits at home and doesn't work? Okay. Do you think they would have been a world-class employee if they had been in the workspace? Do you think they would have been like lighting the world on fire, the person who just wants to sit on a couch? But what happens when people sit on a couch? Generally, if somebody is like, yeah, I got UBI, I don't got to work, they're going to get bored very quickly. they're going to start creating some value very quickly. Maybe
Start a
that's
YouTube
through
channel.
like a YouTube channel, like genuinely. Like
Yeah.
people have a need to do stuff genuinely. And the people who aren't doing stuff, there's a reason for that too. They're like, oh, well, I would hate to see that person laying on the couch and not working. Well, what if that, like, I feel like we've all known people in our lives who have really struggled with, say, depression,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what if, like, where's the compassion for that person? Where's the compassion for all that? You would be amazed what great things we deny ourselves as a society out of fear that somebody who we feel doesn't deserve it may benefit. Like, people deny themselves the stability of UBI out of fear that people who they don't think deserve it benefit. You can show them all the research that you like that shows that people do not louse about. In reality, the people who don't work when they're on UBI, do you know what they're doing? Caring for their kids. They're caring for
Yeah.
their kids. That's valuable. That's a value to society. Maybe it doesn't show up on a balance sheet, but it is a value to society. And so this is sort of the second part of the problem is, you know, when you're only evaluating people according to their work, then you're also likely only evaluating these programs and these strategies based on short-term bottom line thinking. And there's more than that. You can generate value in a society that goes beyond just money. And as long as we associate value with money and work and not much else, it's hard to make things better. People need to be reminded that there's a hell of a lot more to life than just money and work. And if you can bring about a UBI, that can help to expand people. It can help somebody who's really struggling to take a little time away from work. It can help somebody who becomes disabled to, you know, recover or build a life that works for them. It can buy somebody, like, suppose somebody, you know, has a kid, and then when their mat leave comes up, their kid has severe medical needs and they just can't go back to work. They're okay now. And frankly, the fact that that parent is going to be protected, if somebody else who gets it doesn't deserve it, I don't care, because I can't, how can I evaluate deserves? Right? It's sort of like, you know, when I was younger, I used to get real snarky when I saw people parking in handicap spots that didn't have a visible disability. And now, as I've gotten older, I'm like, and I've got a wife with MS who has an invisible disability. Now I'm like, what was I thinking? Right? But in that moment, you're like, well, but somebody who might not deserve it might be benefiting. And it's like, what? How do you get to evaluate deserve? Who are you?
Well, I think like when you're saying that, like the compassion stuff pops into my mind immediately, and I agree with you on that. But I'm always trying to like think, okay, if I was against this, what would I say right now? And the thing I'd be like, oh, if you had universal basic income, it would just inflate the prices of everything, because then the minimum amount people have, it goes up, and then people would like the prices of everything would increase, and then. Another thing is like people always want to be ahead of the Joneses, right? They want to keep up, but they want to be ahead, right? So I feel like people's main thing is that universal basic income would just make everything more expensive, and like just overall just not solve the problem. It would just kick the can down the like. If everyone got $1,500 a month, universal basic income, rent would be $1,600. Like, you know, stuff like that. It would just bump up. And like, I'm not sure. I don't know enough about economics to counter that. If I was sitting at the bar with my buddies and they said that, I wouldn't know what to say.
Well, so is the problem in that situation supporting the person, or is the problem the capitalists jacking the prices?
Well, it's the capitalist, but I feel like most people think that that's unchangeable.
Well, but
Right?
this is it. Is
Yeah.
all things made by man can be unmade by man, right?
Yeah.
This system as it is, yeah, we may potentially see price gouging. Sure. So the answer isn't to deny UBI income. It's to build price gouging laws into this process, right? The answer isn't to, you know, if rent's going to jump, well, then we certainly better have affordable housing in place, right? Like where the government is able to hold those prices down. Right. It's recognizing that, like, where are you directing your ire and where are you directing your energy here? Because the person receiving $2,100 a month for UBI or whatever the number may be isn't the problem here. The people ripping them off are. And so let's direct our energies there rather than the person receiving the UBI.
Right. There needs to be like a culture shift and like, I guess, deprogramming of people, right?
Yep.
That sounds
It's a cult.
weird. Yeah.
No, it is. It's a lot of these people. It's cult techniques get used, and so the way that you deprogram is very similar. Like you don't walk up to them and be like, "Hey, you're stupid in a cult." That just entrenches them. You do it by trying to recognize where they're coming from, trying to view them with a little bit of compassion and humanity. You can still have boundaries, of course, and you can still have your beliefs and values. You don't need to approve of them, but you can at least try to think and put yourself in their shoes and try to connect a little bit.
Yeah, and I have a couple things on that. I have a couple more questions that I really want because I have to make sure I get them to you because,
of course,
again, my really good friends were talking about this, and if we had a discussion about socialism or Marxism or universal basic income, and you just clearly laid out like the positives of socialism, right? Of like distributing to the people, giving the profit back to the people. You could do every logical like data point about that, but then someone who reads like the Gulag Archipelago or something like that, and he's like, well, every time communism and socialism has been in the play, millions of people starved or something like that, and they say it never works. And then that's usually like the cutoff point for that is like
capitalism known for its utopia.
Right. Yeah, well, exactly. So I'm like, we've never been to late stage capitalism.
Whenever somebody cites the number of people killed under communism, just ask them, okay, how many people killed under capitalism? The answer is enormously bigger, right? And so, but also that number that's cited is often like a pretty goose number. Saying that the problem is most of the examples of socialism you see from history or that people cite as socialism are different stuff, right? There's nuance here. And so they've just been sort of weaponized against it. Like, let me give you the example of the Soviet Union. Okay. The Soviet Union pre-communism was a largely agrarian society that was very left behind by the rest of the world. Under the czars, they were floundering. And then communists kind of rolled in, and the revolution was there's horrors within the revolution, obviously. But it led to the industrialization and modernization of Russia. It led to Russia becoming a world power, the Soviet Union becoming a world power. It brought enormous numbers of people out of poverty. It provided healthcare to enormous numbers of people. Yes, there were harms, but it was also, by many other measures, a tremendous success. The world right now looks at China and says, well, we just can't compete. Yeah, because they're doing a really good job on a lot of things. That's obviously China has many flaws as well, but that planned economy is absolutely running rings around most of the world right now, right? And so what you see is people seeing very narrow bands of this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, communism definitely not workable except in China and except in the way that it turned Russia around in lots of ways. Think about, again, it's got its own problems, but think about Cuba. Cuba's been able to hold out as this, sort of incredibly isolated nation for ages, under remarkable duress. Like, I don't know how many nations would have been able to withstand what Cuba's withstood. And so it's people with a very narrow view. And so the answer isn't to deny their view. The answer is to expand their view, right? Because they are right. People died under communism. Absolutely. Let's think a little bit further then. Right. And that's how you sort of break those ideas down.
Okay. Yeah. And, I like the idea of expanding your view. Like, hey, let's think about this. Like, there is like some hard gaps that I can't get through. Like that one, I'm definitely going to try to think about that a bit more and educate myself to become a better teacher, I guess, to my buddies.
My advice, learn about China. Understand China. And that doesn't mean that it's something aspirational. It means it'll give you a window into a different way of relating to government, a different way of organizing a society. And once you're like, oh, there's another place that's run totally different, then you go down the rabbit hole of, well, how are other places run? And it's about expanding your viewpoint. It's about giving yourself different options and recognizing, like, there can be a government that does a lot of bad things, but has a lot of good internal structures, right? The people making the decisions can be bad, but the structure and the format can be good, right? There's different ways to look at this sort of thing.
Yeah, the structure. I'll definitely go through China because I won't go through all of it, but I'll look at it.
I mean, Hitler was democratically elected, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's bad people in no matter what format of government that you see. And there are bad actors who will attempt to corrupt those systems, and that's where public participation comes in.
Right. And then so that's a entry point for me. And another thing, like, and again, you probably don't have to answer to this, but
You never know.
when you're dealing with the conspiracy theories, so like I have, again, like people that I respect and they're polite and they're great people, they talk about how the forest fires are actually like left-wing people setting it on fire to emphasize how bad climate is or trying to get their climate agenda. And like educated people are thinking this, right? And obviously, like, because I don't outright try to lie, like I say, like, I literally don't know anything about that. I just know that it's getting drier and drier. And then they go, well, like I literally had someone tell me, no, like people aren't even talking about CO2. They're talking about carbon and CO2 are different. And I'm like, carbon like it's the gas, like it's like there's not solid carbon in the atmosphere or whatever. And then I try to explain, and then this is where I always fail. Like I try to explain like the shape of the carbon molecule, how it bounces off sunlight, bounces down, and then like the ice caps are decreasing, making our albedos weaker, and then it's heating it up, and then I just lose them completely because they've already put it in their mind that the world goes through cycles or whatever, and that's it. And then once you have that denial of science, all the policies on anything progressive go out the window because no one believes it, right? Like, again, like I think what you're saying about expanding the view, listening to their concerns and their problems, and like trying to get them to think about it, that's my only way I can think how to help them. Okay. Not even help them, just get them more informed, I guess.
That person is not your target. That person is not your target. That doesn't mean you throw them away. That doesn't mean you dismiss them. It means you recognize that talking to that person and spending a lot of time on that person is not productive. So let me give you sort of an imaginary example, and I'll give you a sense of how I sort of think about that sort of thing.
Okay.
You've got, Ron, the real wacky guy at the shop who has all these kooky conspiracy theories. And then you got three other guys who are like, I don't know, like kind of conservative leaning. They voted Poilievre. They think the climate change thing's all kind of nonsense. But they're not like, oh my God, the libs are lighting fires. Those are the ones you talk to. Because the conspiracy theory dude ain't going to listen to you. He's going to listen to his buddies who say, shut up, Ron, that's stupid. Right? And so if you equip those three, the other three in the room, who he already has a pre-existing trust with, relationship with, then maybe you got a shot. You talk past them. Right? That guy is not going to be a productive guy to talk to. And so recognizing that and focusing your energy where it's going to be productive is a great way to do that. It's that sort of wiggly middle that you spend your energy on. Because like you're not going to reason somebody out of a position they didn't reason themselves into.
Right. And then like still understand that Ron could be a good father and he could be a nice man and everything like that. But then, yeah, it's just that cognitive dissonance with, like, I'll tell you, like,
people always say like, oh, they're so propagandized and they've been manipulated and all this stuff. And then they hate them for it. And it's like, well, if you actually think they're victims of outside forces, shouldn't your response be like compassion and support rather than like it's so weird, isn't it? Like we folks on the left in particular will acknowledge the material conditions and the environmental conditions and social conditions and all that stuff that lead to poor behaviors or antisocial behaviors or harmful behaviors. They'll be like, oh yeah, I understand how people with addiction come to have addiction, or I understand how people who commit crimes come to commit crimes, and I have compassion for them. But as soon as this is conservative, that all kind of flies out the window. And so I think it's important to recognize like these people came through this stuff through a long journey, through a complex journey, and just like a basic recognition of that seems to go a really long way.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I actually became more progressive when I moved to Alberta.
Hmm.
Again, I grew up in Manitoba, Winnipeg. I went to the University of Manitoba, and having family that works in energy, I was just like confronted by how wrong we were all the time, everything like that, all the time in university, and like just almost looked like I was the villain. It felt
Hmm.
like I was trying to defend stuff that arguably I didn't have any information and knowledge to defend, but it was just what I was growing up with, right? And
Hmm.
then when I moved to Alberta, I kind of brought that same criticism I got over with me. Like I heard what I didn't want to hear at the time, but I heard it
Hmm.
and I had it in the back of my head. And when I got here, I made some really good friends. I been like Fort McMurray, beautiful place to live. Honestly,
Hmm.
it is. It's such a nice place. There's so many good people. Like the most diverse town I've ever lived in. It's new Canadians there all the time, especially being in the school.
Hmm.
Unreal. Like the kids are crazy because they don't know what's going on with the oil and stuff like that. They're just there, right? They just got placed there.
Yeah.
So it's really cool there. But then, yeah, I sort of came in, and I think maybe it's my contrarian nature. It's
Hmm.
just everyone, the more people are pushing on one way, I'll push on the other way. But yeah, I actually became more progressive there. Um, I know I'm cognizant of your time, so I do want to ask you something that I may cut out. I want to share something with you that I may cut out, may not. Just depends how it goes.
Up
But
to you.
I have um, so I voted Liberal.
Hmm.
We won our only riding in Calgary, and it was me
Hmm.
because it was like 48-49 or whatever. It was
Nice.
crazy. Um, but my dad voted Conservative.
Hmm.
He lives in like Chetwynd, so right near Fort St. John, British Columbia. I don't know if you know
Hmm.
where it is, really up north.
Yep.
There's no way that was going to be anything but blue.
Hmm.
But some of these like people that vote Conservative, they are struggling so much in a very specific way that the Pierre Poopy Pants or whatever, he wants to, they see that he has an immediate answer for them. And it really like, it killed me to think about how many other people are voting because of like those initial gut reactions. And like, do you have like any like anything the opinions on that?
It's frustrating because the conservative says, I'll fix it. The liberal says it's complicated. Right.
Yeah.
And the reality of the situation is that it's complicated. And so, like, ask yourself if that person was locked up in an inpatient rehab facility against their will for X number of time, is that
Mm-hmm.
going to make them, you know, is that going to solve the conditions that led to addiction? Is
No, I
that going
don't
to
think it
solve?
is.
And this is
But
it. Is there's so many
they're
surrounding
afraid that
things.
like she was going. They
Hmm.
were immediately worried about her immediate safety,
Hmm.
right? Like,
And you get that, and there
yeah,
are there's already stuff in place for that, emergency holds
mhm,
and things like that. There are already
yeah,
things in place for that. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down from a recognition of what works, right? Like it's one of those things where as systems get more complex and as the world gets more complex, our gut instinct and what actually works are often in opposition. Like when your gut instinct, for example, is to like, when Pierre Poilievre was doing the like, we're going to lock up criminals for a super long time, there's super clear evidence that shows that that doesn't fix
right,
anything and in fact makes crime rates worse, right? It's counterintuitive, but when you think about it, it's sort of the logic makes sense, right? If you stricten, consequences, then people are going to say in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm going to, crime as hard as possible because I'm getting locked up forever anyways. But more than that, like you and I both know, criminals aren't really thinking that far ahead. They aren't thinking like, well, I'll get locked up for 6 years instead of 3. That's not really how that thought
yeah,
process works. And it's the same thing with addiction. The way to deal with addiction is counterintuitive, right? Like the example that always pops into my head is when COVID first sort of hit and liquor stores had to stay open. And there were a bunch of people who were like, that's awful. How that's not an essential service. And it's like, there are a lot of people out there who, if they don't have it, will die. Like just outright die. And that was one of those moments that led to a recognition on my end of like, this is so much more complicated than just stop drinking. right? Or just stop using whatever. And so I think it's the problem is that right now we're faced with conservatism and liberalism has incredibly unsatisfying answers that usually boil down to it's very complicated, you wouldn't understand. And the conservatives have answers that basically boil down to we are all about libertarianism, small government, but also massive use of state authority on people we want to use it on, right? Which is wild. It's bonkers. The problem is that the left has failed to provide a successful alternative, right? So for the example of like, if you're thinking of the immediate safety, right? The safest place isn't necessarily like, if we want a solution that actually works, then a safe place is a supportive environment where, you know, their housing needs are met. It's, you know, safe consumption sites are a part of that because they're able to test things. They're able to offer medical supervision and keep that person alive until they're ready to get sober. Because if they're not ready to change, like you're a teacher, you know, if somebody's not ready to change, they ain't changing. They might pretend to change for a while. But if the change doesn't come from within, it's not going to stick. And so locking somebody up for 6 weeks and saying, you're going to change, does that really fix it? Or is it punting? Trusting your gut with systems and structures is always tricky because our guts build really bad systems. They think very short term and they think very no further than the end of your nose.
Right. You know, that's a good perspective. And thanks. Like, I hope like someone can hear that and like sort of think through it a bit.
Of course.
Yeah. So I guess I'll end it with the thing I end most podcasts with is what is one thing about your profession, like either teaching or transferring to becoming a YouTuber, that isn't typically communicated properly to the mainstream audience, media, everyday people?
The answer is the same for both. There is no succeeding in teaching and there is no succeeding in content creation without community, without building a sense of community in your space, without building a sense of connection where people feel safe, where people feel able to learn and grow. Because community is what creates receptiveness for growth. Community is what creates the context for growth and change, right? People learn a lot more and grow a lot faster when they're not getting screamed at. People grow and learn a lot faster when they feel safe, when they feel welcome, when they feel valued. And so I think the essential value of community in both of those contexts, I think, is the most important thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And it's almost like a dream come true because I have been listening to you for every day, like, man, Sunday or Saturday, whenever What the Hell Canada comes out.
Sunday, yeah.
Like the first thing my girlfriend hears, like when she wakes up, is like, like and then,
it's a good tune.
Yeah. Speaking of tunes, okay, so I gotta share this with you because I literally I thought I was going insane. But I developed a game when I was teaching computer science. I developed a game, and I contracted out like trailer music. It was for like a game called Atrium Invasion. And I was listening to What the Hell Canada, and one of your segments, I was like, oh my God, that is the exact same song that someone said that they personally designed for this trailer. And I want to see if I'm going insane here.
So that song is called Higher Octane by Vans in Japan, and it is a copyright-free tune.
Okay, because some guy named Zach charged me $50 US, saying that this because I told him something similar to the theme song of Maximum Carnage from the Sega Genesis, and he gave me that.
So
no.
I mean, hey, there's a possibility he's the one who wrote it. I don't know, but that is the name of the song. It is. I found it on a copyright-free playlist on YouTube.
Darn it! But yeah, awesome. So I'll just end it now. I'll say thank you, and then just stay on the call just for a second so we can I can chat for a second. Okay.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for tuning in to Professional Development with me, Mr. Drover. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your fellow educators. You can also connect with me on Instagram or via email to continue the conversation and share your thoughts. Well, until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference, both inside and outside the classroom. I'll see you in the next episode.